The principle of sowing and reaping is one of the most consistent, unchanging, and divinely upheld systems found throughout Scripture and woven into the fabric of human experience. It is not confined to agriculture, it is the rhythm of life itself. Everything in creation responds to this law, and the Bible presents it not as a suggestion or a poetic idea, but as an eternal covenant established by God. When the floodwaters receded and Noah stepped onto dry ground, God spoke a declaration that has never been revoked. As long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest will continue. This means that the entire world is built upon the expectation that whatever is released from your hands will produce something multiplied in return. It is the oldest spiritual economy and the only one heaven directly guarantees. To understand the power of sowing and reaping, one must first embrace the truth that seed is a divine trust. God never designed anyone to live from need. He designed us to live from seed. Need is what we feel, but seed is what we carry. Every person, regardless of background or circumstance, has been given something to plant. It may be a skill, a relationship, a word of encouragement, a financial blessing, an idea, or a simple act of service. Seed takes many forms, and because of that, the principle works in every environment. A farmer plants seeds into the soil, but a leader plants vision into people. A parent plants values into children. A believer plants love into hurting hearts. The harvest always mirrors the seed, but multiplies far beyond its size. Seed also introduces a divine paradox. You can either eat your seed or plant it. Eating brings temporary satisfaction. Planting produces generational impact. Many people pray for a harvest without recognizing that harvest is unlocked by the courage to release what God has placed inside them. Nothing grows in a closed hand. Seed must leave your possession to enter God's multiplication. This is why Scripture emphasizes giving, serving, kindness, diligence, and faithfulness, not as moral duties, but as planting actions that provoke divine reactions. When a person becomes a sower, they step into partnership with a spiritual law that functions in every culture, era, and economy. Another dimension of sowing and reaping is intentionality. No farmer sows randomly or carelessly. Seed is directed with purpose. Likewise, a believer must learn to sow with vision, clarity, and intention. If you want a harvest of peace, sow words of peace. If you want favor, sow honor. If you want opportunity, sow excellence and discipline. If you want financial increase, sow generosity. Seed determines the kind of future you will experience. Life does not respond to wishes, complaints, or emotions. It responds to seed. The seed you plant today shapes the environment you live in tomorrow. This is not manipulation. It is alignment with God's governing order. Sowing is also deeply connected to faith. Seed leaves your hand before it enters your future. You must release it without yet seeing the harvest. This requires trust in God's character and timing. A seed may appear small and insignificant, but it carries the blueprint of the future within it. Faith looks at a seed and sees a field. Faith understands that delay is not denial. Every seed goes through a silent, hidden, underground process. Many people give up during this stage because they cannot yet see results. But God works in the unseen realm long before he reveals the harvest in the visible realm. The farmer does not dig up the seed daily to check its progress. He trusts the cycle established by God. In the same way, faith-filled sowing produces harvests that may take time but will not fail. There is also a principle of measure. Scripture teaches that the measure you use will be measured back to you. This means that the size of your harvest corresponds to the size of your seed. A small planting brings a small harvest. An abundant planting brings an abundant harvest. This is not about comparison with others. It is about the openness of your own heart. Some people sow sparingly because they fear loss. But seed is never loss. It is investment into divine multiplication. Fear shrinks seed, but faith enlarges it. When a person trusts that God governs the harvest, their willingness to sow increases and their capacity to receive expands. Sowing also transforms the sower. Each act of planting shapes character, enlarges perspective, and deepens dependence on God. It shifts a person from a survival mindset to a stewardship mindset. Instead of clinging to what they have, they become channels through which God can move resources, ideas, compassion, and influence. A person who sows consistently becomes a person God can trust with more because their heart is aligned with His purposes. Seed creates not only external harvests but internal enlargement. Sowing and reaping further breaks the limitations placed by circumstances. Even in times of famine, those who sow experience supernatural results. Isaac sowed in the land during a drought and reaped 100-fold. This reveals that conditions do not control the harvester, obedience does. When God is involved, unfavorable climates cannot stop seed from producing. Seed carries divine immunity against external instability. Ultimately, the principle of sowing and reaping is God's way of ensuring continuous flow, increase, and provision in the lives of His people. It is reliable because it is rooted in His unchanging nature. He watches over every seed planted in faith, and He delights in multiplying it beyond human expectation. The business of serving and uplifting people is anchored in one of the deepest truths in Scripture. People matter to God more than anything else in creation. When God looks at the earth, He does not measure value by structures, systems, or landscapes. He measures it by the worth of human lives. Every soul is His craftsmanship, His breath in a body, His image reflected on earth. Because of this, any work that invests in people carries a weight of divine significance that never diminishes. Economies rise and fall, industries transform, and technologies shift. But the need to guide, uplift, serve, and strengthen people remains constant in every generation. To participate in this kind of work is to operate in an area of God's heart where failure cannot take root. Throughout the Bible, God consistently elevates those who commit themselves to the well-being of others. Joseph rose because he interpreted dreams which served people. Daniel's wisdom preserved entire kingdoms because it saved lives. Ruth's loyalty birthed a lineage that led to kings because she valued the person in front of her. Jesus Himself demonstrated that greatness in the kingdom is not measured by status or skill, but by the willingness to serve. When He washed the feet of His disciples, He dismantled every earthly definition of leadership and rebuilt it around humility, compassion, and selfless action. Serving people is not a lesser calling. It is the highest form of influence recognized in heaven. When you enter the business of uplifting people, teaching, mentoring, guiding, healing, counseling, encouraging, solving problems, or simply being present, your work becomes aligned with God's eternal priorities. People are the only investment that carries into eternity. Everything else fades, but the impact you make in a life echoes beyond time. That is why businesses centered on people endure. Whether through education, hospitality, medicine, caregiving, ministry, community development, or even simple neighborly kindness, anything devoted to improving someone's life plugs directly into a stream of divine favor. People are also God's chosen vessels for his purposes. Whenever God wanted to accomplish something on earth, he didn't choose mountains or rivers, he chose humans. He sought Abraham, he called Moses, he anointed David, he commissioned prophets, he empowered disciples. When you honor people, you honor God's chosen instruments. When you uplift someone, you indirectly uplift the purpose God placed in them. When you strengthen a person, you strengthen the divine assignment they carry. This is why serving people never fails, because you are partnering with the very intention of God for humanity. Serving people is not limited to grand gestures or public acts. Often, the greatest impact is made through quiet consistency. A kind word spoken at the right moment can redirect a destiny. A patient mentor can unlock confidence in someone who once felt overlooked. A helper who notices pain others ignore can restore hope in a heart that was ready to give up. The business of uplifting people thrives on attention to the unseen and compassion for the uncelebrated. God himself pays close attention to those who care for the lowly, the hurting, and the forgotten. When you invest in people no one else values, heaven invests in you. Another strength of this principle is its resilience. People-centered work remains necessary in every season. Economies may collapse, but someone still needs encouragement. Technology may advance, but someone still needs guidance. Cultural shifts may alter how communities interact, but someone still needs healing. Human beings will always require support emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally, and physically. This makes the business of serving people future-proof. You are never out of relevance when you care for people, because human need never ends. As long as there is a heart beating on earth, there is someone who needs the grace you carry. Service also shapes the one who serves. When you uplift people, you expand your capacity for empathy, wisdom, patience, and love. You become more like the God who created you. You begin to see beyond flaws, weaknesses, and outward appearances, recognizing the treasure hidden in every soul. Serving people is not merely an action. It becomes a lens through which you view the world. It cultivates generosity because your focus shifts from what you can receive to what you can give. It produces joy because there is fulfillment in knowing that your life has made someone else's burdens lighter. It develops strength because service demands perseverance and humility. The person who serves grows in ways others cannot comprehend. The business of uplifting people also generates its own form of harvest. When you invest in people, they often become builders of your vision, supporters of your mission, carriers of your influence, and testimonies of your faithfulness. People remember those who helped them heal, learn, or rise. They remember those who stood beside them when others walked away. Favor is attracted to those who consistently add value to others. Opportunities open for those who help open doors for others. When you sow into people, you reap through people, but from God. In addition, serving people positions you to receive divine insights. When your heart aligns with God's heart for humanity, He entrusts you with ideas, strategies, and solutions that are not given to the self-centered. Revelation flows through compassion. Wisdom flows through empathy. Creativity flows through love. Those who uplift people become channels through which God releases what heaven wants to bring to earth. Working with people also invites God's protection. When your assignment is to care for lives, heaven takes responsibility to care for yours. There is a shield that surrounds those who pour into others. There is a covering that accompanies those who carry God's heart for his children, and because people are his treasured possession, he honors those who honor them. The business of wisdom and creativity operates on a completely different level from the shifting patterns of earthly economies. While markets fluctuate and trends come and go, wisdom remains timeless and creativity remains endlessly renewable. Scripture presents wisdom not as mere intelligence, but as a spiritual force, a divine resource that predates the world itself. Before mountains rose, before oceans formed, before the foundations of the earth were laid, wisdom existed with God. Because of this, anything built on wisdom carries a durability that cannot be shaken by external conditions. Wisdom is not dependent on culture, environment, or industry. It transcends all of them. Creativity, likewise, is rooted in the nature of God. The very first introduction the Bible gives us about him is that he is a creator. When a person engages in creativity, whether through ideas, solutions, inventions, artistry, or innovation, they participate in a divine pattern that never diminishes in value. Wisdom is more than knowledge. Knowledge gathers information, wisdom interprets and applies it. Knowledge sees what is, wisdom sees what could be. Knowledge may fill books, but wisdom builds nations. The reason wisdom never fails is because it guides decisions, shapes character, and directs actions with precision. A wise person can navigate storms that sink others. A wise thinker can perceive opportunities hidden beneath chaos. When you pursue wisdom, you gain a compass that functions in every season. The Bible declares that wisdom is better than silver and yields more profit than gold. This is because markets may crash, but wisdom remains profitable. Wisdom elevates a person above the limitations of their environment. Even if resources are scarce, wisdom multiplies what is available. Creativity is equally powerful because it takes the raw materials of life and forms something new. Creativity transforms limitations into possibilities. When others see dead ends, the creative mind sees pathways. When others see problems, creativity sees solutions waiting to be uncovered. Creativity does not rely on external supply. It draws from the internal well of imagination that God placed within every person. This is why some of the most successful individuals in history rose not through inheritance or favorable conditions, but through the ability to think differently. Creativity births ideas that outlive circumstances. Ideas travel across generations. Ideas shift cultures. Ideas rebuild worlds. The person who operates in creativity carries a resource that cannot be depleted because creativity draws from the infinite mind of God. Wisdom and creativity work together like partners. Wisdom provides structure while creativity provides expression. Wisdom builds the foundation. Creativity designs the future. Wisdom gives direction. Creativity gives motion. When both are active, a person becomes capable of achieving what others consider impossible. A wise decision guided by creative insight can birth entire industries. A creative concept rooted in wisdom can transform communities. This combination withstands pressure because it is not rooted in external conditions, but in internal cultivation. This principle thrives even during crisis. Historically, some of the greatest leaps forward in society have come during difficult times. When environments become unstable, wise and creative people rise to the surface with fresh ideas, unconventional solutions, and new approaches. They recognize that challenges often break old systems, creating room for new ones to emerge. Wisdom provides discernment to know when to adapt, when to innovate, and when to rebuild. Creativity provides the courage to experiment, explore, and produce something unprecedented. The world never stops needing wisdom and creativity, no matter the era. Wisdom also protects. It shields from unnecessary loss, prevents destructive decisions, and illuminates the right path. A single moment of wisdom can save years of regret. A single insight can redirect an entire destiny. Many failures in life come not from lack of effort, but from lack of wisdom. Effort without wisdom leads to exhaustion. Wisdom directs effort into effectiveness. Those who prioritize wisdom find that their work becomes more strategic, efficient, and fruitful. Because wisdom is rooted in God's own nature, it carries the stability of eternity. Pursuing wisdom and creativity also positions a person for influence. People are drawn to those who can solve problems, provide clarity, offer insight, and create new possibilities. Wisdom attracts honor because it carries weight. Creativity attracts attention because it inspires imagination. Together, they open doors that qualifications alone cannot. A wise and creative individual becomes valuable in any environment, regardless of economic state. They are not limited to one field because wisdom applies universally and creativity adapts continually. These qualities also produce independence. If your success depends solely on external systems, you are vulnerable to their collapse. But if your success flows from wisdom and creativity, you carry your economy within you. Wisdom gives direction even when others are confused. Creativity generates options even when resources are limited. You become a source rather than a seeker, a contributor rather than a consumer. Cultivating these qualities requires intentionality. Wisdom grows through listening, learning, observing, and seeking God's perspective. Creativity grows through curiosity, experimentation, and a willingness to break patterns. Both flourish in environments of reflection and openness. The more you expose your mind to truth, beauty, knowledge, and the leading of the Spirit, the more you expand its capacity to produce insight. A mind connected to God becomes a wellspring of innovation. Finally, wisdom and creativity align a person with divine timing. They tune the heart to recognize moments of opportunity that others overlook. They help you sense when to move, when to wait, when to build, and when to release. This internal alignment prevents premature action and reveals hidden windows of favor. Because wisdom and creativity originate from God, they connect your work to His timing, His order, and His flow. Aligning work with God's purpose establishes a foundation of stability, meaning, and endurance that no human strategy can replicate. When a person aligns their efforts, decisions, pursuits, and ambitions with what God intends, they enter a realm where success is not accidental but inevitable. God's purpose is the highest blueprint for any life, and when work is shaped according to that divine plan, it becomes infused with strength that surpasses human capability. Scripture shows repeatedly that individuals who walked in divine purpose accomplished more than their skills alone could ever achieve. Purpose is not merely a direction, it is spiritual architecture. It is God's design for how your gifts, experiences, and opportunities fit together to accomplish something eternal. When work aligns with that architecture, it carries the mark of heaven and becomes unshakable. There is a profound difference between doing work that is personally desirable and doing work that is divinely assigned. Personal goals can produce activity, but divine purpose produces fruit that remains. Personal ambition may build platforms, but divine purpose builds legacy. When a person pursues goals that do not align with God's design for them, they often find themselves striving, exhausted, or unfulfilled, even if outward success is achieved. But when they align with God's purpose, there is a sense of flow, clarity, and grace that cannot be manufactured. Obstacles may still arise, but they no longer have the power to derail progress because purpose fuels perseverance. With purpose, challenges become stepping stones instead of barriers. Aligning with God's purpose begins with surrender. It requires placing personal preferences, timelines, and comfort zones at the feet of the one who sees the entire picture. Purpose is rarely discovered through self-centered pursuit. It is revealed through listening, obedience, and willingness to be directed. God does not hide purpose, but He unfolds it, often step by step, ensuring that the journey itself shapes the person into who they must become to carry the assignment. In this process, motives are refined, character is strengthened, and faith becomes anchored. Work aligned with purpose is sustained not by external praise or reward, but by internal conviction. Even in seasons of invisibility or uncertainty, purpose keeps a person moving forward. When work aligns with divine purpose, it attracts the provision necessary to accomplish it. God resources what He authors. This means that opportunities, relationships, finances, creativity, and strength come together in ways that defy natural explanation. Provision may not always arrive early, but it always arrives on time. Stories throughout Scripture show that when individuals embraced divine assignments, God supplied everything required for the mission. Moses received strategy, Joshua received courage, Nehemiah received favor, Esther received influence, Paul received revelation. Purpose draws supernatural assistance. When you walk in what God has designed for you, you never walk alone. Alignment with divine purpose also brings protection. God guards the work that He initiates. When you commit your labor to His direction, He shields you from attacks that would destroy others, blocks paths that are not meant for you, and redirects you when necessary. This protection may not always look like avoidance of difficulty, but it always guarantees preservation through difficulty. Purpose becomes a covering, a guiding force that keeps a person stable when environments shift. Because God is invested in His own purpose, He becomes invested in the one carrying it out. One of the clearest signs that work is aligned with God's purpose is the presence of inner peace. This peace may coexist with challenges, pressure, or uncertainty, but it remains an anchor. Peace is not passive. It is a spiritual confirmation that the path is ordained. Many people chase success yet feel empty because their work is disconnected from purpose. But when work aligns with the reason God created you, even small tasks feel meaningful and ordinary work becomes sacred. Purpose gives significance to every action, whether public or private. Another advantage of aligning work with God's purpose is that it produces endurance. People burn out when they operate outside of their calling because they are fueled by human strength alone. But purpose generates resilience. It gives the ability to keep going when others quit, to remain faithful when others drift, and to stay focused when others are distracted. Purpose transforms work into worship, and worship draws strength from God Himself. A person working in divine purpose may feel tired, but they do not feel defeated. Their spirit remains alive because they are connected to the source of their assignment. Work aligned with God's purpose also influences others more deeply. Purpose carries a magnetic quality. It inspires, uplifts, challenges, and awakens something inside those who encounter it. People can sense when someone is walking in their divine assignment because there is passion without striving, confidence without arrogance, and impact without manipulation. Purpose-driven work becomes a testimony of God's wisdom and power. It opens doors not only for the person carrying the purpose, but for everyone connected to them. The alignment of one life can shift the trajectory of many others. Purpose also simplifies decisions. When you know what God has called you to do, distractions lose their power. Not every opportunity is meant to be pursued, and not every open door is God's door. Purpose filters choices. It clarifies priorities. It reduces confusion. A person aligned with purpose is not pulled in every direction because they are anchored in one direction. They understand that saying yes to their assignment requires saying no to many other things. This clarity creates focus, and focus accelerates progress. Finally, aligning work with God's purpose ensures that the results of that work transcend time. Human achievements may fade, but purpose-driven work produces outcomes that ripple into eternity. Purpose connects everyday labor with divine impact. It ensures that nothing is wasted and that even the smallest act contributes to something far greater than what can be seen in the moment. Generosity opens supernatural doors of provision because it reflects the very nature of God, whose character is built on giving. From the moment creation began, God demonstrated himself as a giver. He gave breath, he gave life, he gave wisdom, he gave purpose, he gave his Son, and he continues giving grace and mercy every single day. When a person chooses generosity, they align themselves with this divine flow. Generosity is not merely an act. It is a spiritual position that unlocks blessings that logic cannot explain. It invites God into the realm of your resources, transforming ordinary giving into supernatural circulation. Whenever someone gives from a sincere heart, they release a spiritual law that sets provision in motion. Generosity is powerful because it breaks the grip of scarcity. Scarcity is not simply a lack of resources. It is a mindset that fears running out. Generosity destroys this fear by shifting trust from one's own supply to God's unlimited abundance. When a person gives, they declare through action that God, not money, not possessions, not effort, is their source. This shift in trust invites heaven to respond. Scripture consistently shows that God multiplies what is released. What is withheld remains alone, but what is sown returns in ways beyond comprehension. Generosity says, I do not live by what I see. I live by the God who provides for me even in the unseen. The miraculous dimension of generosity is that the amount given is not the determining factor. The heart behind the giving is. A small seed given with faith has greater power than a large seed given without belief. God does not measure generosity by size, but by sacrifice, sincerity, and willingness. The widow who gave 2 coins gave more than those who contributed great sums because she gave with trust. Generosity is not measured by what leaves your hand, but by what remains in your heart. When generosity is driven by faith, it becomes a key that opens doors no human effort could force open. Generous people experience supernatural favor because generosity attracts the attention of heaven and the affection of people. When you give, whether through resources, time, encouragement, or kindness, you build bridges of goodwill that create new opportunities. People remember those who help them. Communities support those who uplift them. doors open for those who sow into others' needs. Even in environments where competition is fierce, generosity sets a person apart as trustworthy, compassionate, and valuable. Favor follows generosity because generosity reflects the heart of God, and people instinctively respond to that reflection. Generosity also multiplies because it functions like a seed. Every act of giving is a planting of something into the soil of someone else's life. Seeds do not stay the same size. They grow, they produce, they multiply. When you give, you may not immediately see the growth, but something begins unfolding beneath the surface. Opportunities are forming, connections are aligning, and provision is preparing itself to return. Just as a farmer does not expect a seed to produce overnight, a generous person understands that their giving sets a process in motion. In due time, the harvest comes, sometimes from the place you sowed into, and sometimes from unexpected directions, but it always comes. One of the most overlooked aspects of generosity is that it changes the giver. When you give, you expand internally. Your capacity for love widens. Your understanding of God's faithfulness deepens. Your heart becomes more sensitive to the needs of others. Generosity transforms a person from being self-focused to being God-focused and others-focused. It creates a life that is not centered on accumulation but on contribution. This shift produces joy that cannot be bought. Generous people tend to live lighter, freer, and more fulfilled because they participate in the divine cycle of releasing and receiving. Generosity also breaks cycles of selfishness and pride. When a person refuses to give, they place trust in their own ability to maintain what they have. This creates pressure and anxiety because self-sufficiency was never designed to sustain the human heart. Generosity releases this burden. It reminds you that you are not the final provider. God is. It humbles the soul and aligns the mind with God's order. Through giving, you acknowledge that every blessing you have received is ultimately from Him, and that He can bring more whenever needed. This humility positions your life for greater blessing because God gives more to those whose hearts He can trust. Another divine mystery of generosity is that it creates flow. Stagnation happens when resources are hoarded, but flow happens when resources are released. Stagnant water grows polluted. Flowing water remains clear. The same is true in life. When you keep everything to yourself, fear grows, selfishness grows, and anxiety grows. But when you give, faith grows, gratitude grows, and possibility grows. Generosity keeps your life moving, expanding, and refreshing. It opens space for God to pour more into you because you are not clogged with accumulation. Generosity also aligns with God's promises. Scripture repeatedly affirms that those who give will never lack. This is not a formula, it is a covenant. God ensures that givers remain replenished because they serve as channels for His kindness on earth. When you meet the needs of others, God commits Himself to meeting yours. This creates a supernatural cycle of supply. Even in seasons of economic uncertainty, generous people often find themselves shielded from lack because God honors their heart. Finally, generosity positions a person to receive blessings that go beyond finances. Peace, relationships, wisdom, open doors, strength, and divine guidance often flow into the lives of those who give generously. While money can be part of the harvest, it is rarely the whole picture. God rewards generosity in ways that transform every dimension of life because generosity is not a financial action. It is a spiritual posture that makes room for God's abundant involvement in everything you do. Faith-driven obedience attracts divine partnership in every endeavor because obedience is the language of trust. and trust is the currency of relationship with God. When a person obeys God not casually, not selectively, but wholeheartedly, they declare that his wisdom surpasses their own understanding. They choose his direction over their preferences, his timing over their impatience, and his ways over their habits. This posture draws God close because God partners intimately with those who walk in alignment with his voice. Obedience is not simply following rules. It is responding to the leading of the one who sees the end from the beginning. It is an act of faith that says, even when I don't see the full picture, I trust the one who designed it. This kind of obedience positions a person under the fullness of God's involvement, guidance, and provision. Faith-driven obedience is uniquely powerful because it is rooted in belief rather than fear or obligation. When obedience flows from faith, it becomes joyful, willing, and expectant. It is not forced, it is embraced. This kind of obedience opens doors that human effort cannot, because it calls upon divine alignment. God responds to faith, and he responds to obedience. When both come together, his response becomes unmistakable. Scripture repeatedly shows that miracles, breakthroughs, and supernatural intervention often hinged on simple acts of obedience. Steps that seemed small, strange, or insignificant, yet carried extraordinary impact because they were rooted in trust. Obedience invites partnership because it signals to God that a person is ready to steward his purpose. God will not invest deeply in someone who refuses to be led. But when a heart says yes, heaven moves. When God sees a person willing to obey even when it is uncomfortable, uncertain, or illogical, he entrusts them with greater assignments, clearer direction, and deeper resources. Obedience proves readiness. It demonstrates that a person values God's will above their own reasoning. In response, God begins to open paths that human strategy could never construct. One of the greatest truths about obedience is that it often precedes understanding. Many people wait to obey until they fully comprehend the outcome, but God frequently reveals outcomes only after obedience. The breakthrough often sits on the other side of a step taken in faith. Faith-driven obedience walks forward even when vision is incomplete, because the trust is not in the path, but in the one giving the instruction. This willingness to move without full visibility attracts divine partnership because it honors God's authority and acknowledges his sovereignty. Where there is honor, there is partnership. Obedience also activates promises. The Bible is filled with conditional blessings, promises unlocked through obedience. When God instructs a person to take a step, it is often because he has already prepared something on the other side of that step. The instruction is the key that opens the door. Without obedience, the door remains closed not because God withholds the blessing, but because the person never turned the key. With obedience, doors swing open because the individual has demonstrated their readiness to receive what God has prepared. Another dimension of faith-driven obedience is that it protects. Often, God's instructions are safeguards disguised as commands. When he tells a person to move, he may be moving them out of danger. When he says to wait, he may be preventing premature exposure. When he redirects, he may be shielding from future harm. Obedience aligns a person with divine protection, even when they cannot perceive the danger they are being protected from. God sees what we do not. When we obey quickly and fully, we walk in the safety of his foresight and the shelter of his wisdom. Obedience also refines character. It shapes humility, patience, trust, and perseverance. These qualities prepare a person to carry greater responsibility and manage greater influence. Without character, promotion becomes a burden. With character, promotion becomes a platform. God uses obedience to develop internal strength before he expands external opportunities. Those who obey consistently are strengthened inwardly in ways that sustain them when blessings increase. Divine partnership requires inner stability, and obedience builds that stability. Faith-driven obedience also unlocks creativity and strategy. When a person aligns their actions with God's instruction, they become more sensitive to His voice, more attuned to His nudges, and more aware of His direction. This creates a flow of divine insight. Ideas arrive with clarity, solutions appear with simplicity, creativity increases because obedience quiets the noise of doubt and opens space for inspiration. Obedience makes room for God to speak, and partnership deepens as He continues to reveal more. Another reason obedience attracts divine partnership is that it demonstrates stewardship. When a person obeys with what they currently have, God can trust them with more. Obedience multiplies resources. It expands capacity. It proves reliability. God invests more into the hands of those who show they will use His blessings according to His will. Obedience and stewardship walk together, creating a foundation that God can build upon. Faith-driven obedience also shifts atmospheres. It brings spiritual order into situations marked by confusion or instability. When a person obeys God, they align themselves with heaven's authority, and that alignment influences everything around them. Peace enters where anxiety once ruled, clarity enters where indecision lingered, strength enters where weakness was felt. Obedience realigns environments just as it realigns hearts. Obedience often looks simple, but it carries profound spiritual weight. It may look like making a phone call, giving something away, forgiving someone, starting a project, pausing a plan, or stepping into unfamiliar territory. But heaven sees every obedient act as a signal that partnership can deepen. God does not partner with rebellion or hesitation, but He fully partners with willingness. Finally, faith-driven obedience creates momentum. Each act of obedience makes the next one easier. Each step of faith strengthens confidence. Each moment of surrender deepens connection. Over time, obedience becomes not a challenge but a lifestyle, and partnership with God becomes not an occasional experience but a daily reality.